Hello. I was doing some thinking, and there's a few avenues of tea that I often explain to people in person, but I never really have tried to put it into video before. I'm going to attempt it now. There are sort of three things. So, how to breathe, how to smell, um, comparing tea to rock climbing, and then comparing tea to art. I think by explaining those three things, I could say sort of what tea means to me, and I think how it could inspire other people. Um, First of all, when I ask someone to smell tea, for example, I pass this to somebody. This is a sencha. Okay. Um, I would say, like, what do you smell? And generally speaking, the recipient will get this and they'll, I don't know, it smells sweet, for example. Um, the amount of, it's not for their unwillingness to try, it's just there's some level of ignorance in how to smell properly that is, they just don't know. So I would like to compare what I just did to, um, I can imagine, let's see, there's a book. Okay, there's a book here. It's one of my daughter's books. I'm going to flash the cover, and I want you to tell me what it is. So maybe you could get it, maybe you couldn't. Um, I would say that something sort of complex, and especially with lots of subtleties in tea, just glancing at it, you're going to miss you're going to miss everything. You might get the main picture, like there was something orange on the cover. Now, um, if I held it up though for a couple seconds, okay, well clearly it's a cat. You can see the name of the title. You can see who wrote it. You can see uh, the series name, orange cat. You can see that it's sort of night. You can see that there's green eyes. There's so many details that you could never really absorb if you just saw it for 1 second. So, just with that in mind, if you pick up a tea and you smell with that level of um, dedication, I don't know, enthusiasm, you don't get anything. But if you were to, so this is kind of about breathing, and it ties together. Um, you'd be able to restrict the amount of air. And there's a yoga breath, I've heard from some people that I know. So there's a name for this. I don't know what it's called, but um, if you were to try to breathe in deeply, like breathe in and out, and um, well, right now, let's say, like as I'm talking, my air in my lungs is getting lower and lower, and I'm gonna have to breathe soon. But I could fill my lungs with air in like 1 second, and just I'm going to do that now, and now it's full again. Now I should be able to talk for many more seconds. But like it took me 1 second to fill up the air in my mouth, so in my lungs. Um, Now, alternatively, um, it would take a bit of a rhythm for me to do this, but let's say like I could inhale for like probably 10 seconds straight without much effort. So I'd be like, okay, no, that so my first breath, maybe I could do 5 seconds, but I breathe it out and I breathe it in. Okay, so that was about 10 seconds. Now I'm restricting the amount of air coming in so I can control the, I guess, the length of the breath. So this is the trick. You would want to start to get a handle of how to breathe and how to control that breath. And then using that technique, that's how you're going to smell. You're going to put your nose in and really like truly fill your lungs with that smell. There's so many merits to this. Well, first of all, I learned this from the Magic School Bus cartoon, but I like the way that the analogy works. There's almost puzzle pieces that are flying out of this liquid in the form of aroma, but your nose has receptors for these aromas, but they just have to go into the right space. And if you smell too quickly, they just go right through it. They will not set. So by giving your nose more time to understand what's going on, you'll be able to set more of those puzzle pieces down. Now, puzzles is such a good comparison because if you have 1,000-piece puzzle and you only have 5 pieces down, you can't see what the picture is, not even close. So though if you have 300 or 400 of them down, you'll get an idea of what it is. And by going back to the aroma over and over again, it is sort of putting more pieces down in the puzzle. Now you may not get all of them at once, but just using like memory, you can say, oh yeah, this I've already smelled like the bottom, like southwest quadrant of this puzzle. So in this next infusion, next pot of tea, adding water to the leaves again, now I get to smell, let's say, the northeast. And eventually you get to the point where you start to say like, okay, this part of the puzzle never really reveals itself. Why is that? Okay, well, there could be many reasons, but I think that the brewing methods, what you're doing is insufficient to be able to access those parts of the puzzle. So you'll need to change things. So this segues into the comparing tea to art. So I would love to say the best analogy that I've come up with so far is water is the paper. So depending on the mineral composition, depending on the hardness, the pH, all these kinds of things, you are using different papers. Now for someone who's ever tried to do, let's say, watercolor, if you use computer printing paper, like as slick and smooth as it is, you can't really get some of the effects that you might be able to get if you were painting on something more absorbent, let's say like a Japanese washi paper or something like that. So because of those limitations, you have to understand that there's certain things that cannot be done, or it cannot be done as well. So anyway, water is the paper, and every paint, every single different tea is a different combination of paints. Let's say that, just to simplify, let's say green teas are green colors. You would expect, right? So you may have light greens and medium intensity greens and dark greens. Green tea may also have yellows, may also have browns, may also have gray. And in some cases, I would say, especially in the cases of some Japanese teas, like reds, in the cases of, let's say, some Chinese teas, oranges, violets and purples. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that, let's say every tea is just a set of pigments. Now you have a canvas and you have your paints. Um, when you mix them together, there is a little artist who appears inside of the teapot. So it'd be something like, let's just say that this was water and we pour it into here. And all of a sudden, all these paints and the paper is being mixed together by an artist. Now this artist, unfortunately, has no self-control. And if you were going to leave this forever, which maybe once was an amazing picture, all of a sudden becomes a mess, and leaving it long enough, you get to the point where you can't even tell what's going on anymore. It's like a black canvas covered in ink, or covered in paint. So this artist has no self-control. You need to separate him from the piece when you believe the piece is ready. That's up to you. When it comes to art, I used to go to like anime conventions and comic conventions, and there were some artists that I really like who would work there, and I would get pictures commissioned for me. And it takes them probably about 2 hours or so to make a commissioned picture. And as they're drawing it, several times I've stopped them, and they're like 60% finished or 70% finished. So they're gonna start out by doing a kind of a rough pose, a skeleton. This is with pencil, and then they're going to fill in the lines with like Sharpie or ink, and then eventually erase the pencil marks. But sometimes they're actually pretty frequently for me, like the planning of it and the intention behind the design is a very special thing for me to see. I love to see it. So although you don't necessarily get a very clean, streamlined picture in the end, you can see where their mind was at when it came to drawing it in such a way. So where am I going with this? Okay, let's say that this was steeped for 5 seconds. If you can imagine giving an artist 5 seconds to paint a picture, I think maybe you get like a rough idea with pencil. If you allow them to keep going, they're going to start to fill in the hard lines. The pose is finished. Okay, if you like it in that state, okay, fantastic. That's up to you and your personal preference. Some people would like the finished picture though. So keeping going, okay, the lines are all done in. The picture is in black and white. Maybe you love it. Maybe you love it to be colored. So they start to color it. And then the picture is finished, really. But maybe you want a background. Maybe you don't want just a character. So they start to fill in a background. And then you as the consumer start to think, you know what? That was my bad. Actually, it was better without it. I don't like the kind of background that he created. I kind of wish, it was a jungle instead of a warehouse, or I wish it was like it's details like that. It's like over painting a picture or over drawing a picture. You can say there is too much. So there has to be an acceptance that combining the paint and the canvas with the artist, there has to be a point where you separate them. Now, you'll need to do a lot of trial and error to find what that point is, but you'll get there, and no problem. So you separate them. Now, you have a picture to look at, and depending on how well you did this, you really be able to see a very clear picture. So the idea that the puzzle pieces, maybe if you just did the T haphazardly, maybe it's a 1,000-piece puzzle. But if you brewed it really well, you'd actually start to realize that maybe there's only 50 pieces. Maybe it's a 20-piece puzzle, and you by smelling it long enough, would be able to get all 20 pieces, and you absolutely finish the puzzle, and you look at it, and it's like staring at art. It's a very beautiful experience, but there's levels to this, and it's it has to do with all those parameters that we talked about. But um, there's different qualities of paints out there and pigments. While a great artist can use like mediocre paints and a mediocre, canvas, if he had access or she had access to such a higher quality level, they would be able to do something more interesting. So, to compare this then, to kind of to where this comes to a close, you have in the world, there's teas that are bad. It's clear. And now I feel like most of the people in Canada have never seen a bad tea, and that's I don't envy you. I appreciate to know what is bad. Actually, you can't really know what is good unless you also understand what is bad. So, um, I'm happy that I know what bad is, but most people will never even have an opportunity to try a bad tea because bad teas are hardly exported to a place like Canada. And when I mean bad, it's not like you don't like it. Even a good tea, you can not like it. There's a very subjective side to this. But when I mean bad is there's definitely flavors in tea, and frequently when you buy them from what's the word I want to use? A producer who is more interested in doing mass production. Okay, so more on the economy side of tea rather than the art side of tea. Let's just say it like that. Where tea is something that it's a numbers game. If you're making 60 tons of tea or 100 tons of tea or 1,000 tons of tea, I think it's hard to fathom how much space that takes. And in some poorer areas of the world, if you can imagine the storage conditions for that much tea, like where would it go? How is it stored? Do you think everything is vacuum sealed as soon as it's made? There's no way in hell. Things are tossed into plastic bags and then wrapped in burlap. Maybe there's no plastic bags. So they're in these sacks, like a tarp, and they sit there outside, and they can be next to a highway. So there's cars driving by all the time. Maybe there's in some of these areas a lot of pollution. So this tea is sitting out, absorbing this pollution. Eventually, it's full of it. It gets sold to you, and it tastes like I'm making it sound. It tastes like actively it is killing you as you're drinking it. So these teas exist. Those are bad teas. That's not what I wouldn't recommend them to anybody, but they're good to know that they're out there. I think that at the very least we can start with mediocre tea. And mediocre tea is, well, when you drink it, you don't really think of anything. It's just another tea that you've had in your life. It's like when you go to a hotel and you have tea with breakfast and you rip open a tea bag, and it can be something fancy sounding like Darjeeling, but it just tastes like bullshit tea. So let's just say that those teas are out there. But a step up from that, where tea is good, I would say any good tea, you should be able to pick it up and even without much effort, be like, oh, this smells like apples. And, or anything. But apples just my example right now. Okay, apples is all you get. Doesn't go deeper than that. It doesn't seem interesting enough to try to go deeper. So apples is where it stays. That's good. Okay, better than mediocre, but it's good. Then there's great. So let's say that complex aromatic beverages, you can tap into some memory. So I've had apples a couple thousand times, maybe more in my life, and if surely a few of those times I've had an apple, it is special. Now, as I'm talking about right now, nothing comes to mind, but let's say that I smell this and say, okay, uh, when I was 18, I went to Japan as part of a trip, and my girlfriend at the time, she's my wife now, she had from her sister won tickets to it was a golf course. It's really a nice area. It's called Karuizawa. Very like posh country club kind of place. So Karuizawa, we stayed there, and we don't golf. We're just there for seeing the manicured, rich lifestyle, let's say. So there was a gift shop, and they were selling apples. The apples were like $8 each, and they're Fuji apples. And we bought it, and it was huge, and it was delicious, and juicy, and all these things. So let's say that, some tea smells like apples. You can get a little bit more specific and say, oh, this smells like a Fuji apple. But again, I've had Fuji apples several hundred times, but this one smells like that memory. It's like Fuji apples on a golf course. There's the green smell in the air. It's in a mountain, like you get like this alpine cold wind. It smells great. So let's say that, well, it triggers that memory. So that's no longer that's not a mediocre tea. That's not a good tea. That is a great tea. Now, a level up from great, let's say magnificent tea. It builds the idea that there are things that you've encountered in the past, and it's clear that if those memories could be mixed together, so memories of certain things or certain places or certain times in your life. Let's say that this was like a Fuji apple smell tea. So I would say, it's like I was sitting down and eating hot pot, and the hot pot had lots of red dates in it. So it's sort of like if I took that really juicy Fuji apple and then I dehydrated it to the point where it was soft and pliable. So not like an apple crisp, but like before that, where it's not like almost like an apple pillow. So I took that apple, and after I was eating hot pot, I ate that apple. So it's those blend of flavors that are there, but at the same time, I was outside, it was winter, I was eating this hot pot on a beach, and the tide was low. So there was exposed rocks and seaweed, and it was chilly. So it's like I feel cold, eating this nice, warm, nourishing dish. There's like seaweed and ocean breeze smells in the air, and then I eat this apple. So, like, none of these have ever happened. I've never done that, but it's clear to me that if I did those combinations of things, it would smell like this tea. So, let's say that it is forcing you to create an alternate reality, a fantasy where this aroma makes sense. Now, regular tea, you don't do that. It doesn't give you enough information or interesting aroma to be able to process that. And good tea and great tea doesn't do that either. So magnificent tea, it forces you to create this reality. And then there's the level above that, which we'll call it, I don't know, heavenly tea, perfect tea. When you drink those levels of tea, they taste like tea. you can smell them for as long as you want. Nothing really comes to mind. And it's, for a very long time, it was very frustrating for me to accept that, to the point where, you can spend several $100s to try a pot of tea, something that's like world class, legendary, and then you think like, this is bullshit. This is as interesting as red rose in terms of the, like, I can't think of anything. I can't say that it smells like an apple or an apple memory or an apple fantasy. It just smells like tea. So the difference being between like the worst level of tea or mediocre tea and the heaven-like tea is almost this sense of gravity, where with a like a red rose tea, you could do other things when you're drinking it. You would smell it and be like, oh, okay, nothing there, whatever, I'll read a newspaper, I'll scroll on my phone, I will, have a conversation with somebody. But with those levels of teas, you kind of like, you shut up and you sit there, and your brain is trying so hard to process what's going on, but it can't. It's like you're stuck at step one, and it doesn't allow you to even attempt a painting. It's like it blocks your mind from working. In a way, there's a gravity to the tea, that it's like a black hole for your attention, so that you will drink it and be like, what is this? And then you're just sucked into it until it's gone. Those are what I would say are like the, I don't know, heaven tier teas, the perfect teas. It's something that I feel like I would be able to explain better than that. Give me 10 more years. They don't come by very frequently for me, these kind of, this tier. So it's like every couple years I'll try one. And yeah, they're the more life experience that I get, I think I will be able to kind of explain this more. But in the idea that, like, in a meditation sort of sense, if you close your eyes and you kind of listen to your breathing, for example, your mind starts to wander because your mind is bored. So it's like training, essentially. You need to practice meditating to be able to keep coming back to your breath. Now, with those levels of teas, it's actually very easy. Let's say, rather than focusing on your breath, you're focusing on the aroma of the tea, but there is no aroma. So you're really focusing on nothing, but it's not letting your mind get into other areas. So for the idea that you can use tea for meditating or helping with meditation, those levels of teas are very good. So, well, I think this is already half an hour. I think those three factors, I didn't say one of them yet. I'll close, I'll get to it. The reason why I think tea is interesting is that you can wander almost these fantasy aroma landscapes just using your imagination. And for me, I would like to compare them to, finally, rock climbing. So for the indoor rock climbers who ever tried, you have your wall and you have your grips. A very simple tea, again, to compare to the good tea, it's like a ladder almost. Like, you climb it and you're at the top and you can see a view and you're like, okay, well, that was bullshit. I came here to climb rocks. I don't came here to go climb a ladder. So, okay, a great tea is you're on the grips and you need to figure out how to get up there. And definitely it's possible. So it's a beginner's wall. And then another T might have, I don't know, let's say like this, like this kind of crazy angle where you're climbing up almost, your legs are dangling and you're kind of trying to figure out like how are you going to get to here. So you gotta like jump, and if you fall, you fall. So you get to that level of complexity where you really need to go all out to experience it. And then at the highest level of T, um, it's almost like you're trying to climb like glass, and so you stand here at the bottom and you look up and you're like, this doesn't look like it's possible. And so you put your hands on the glass and you like just slide down and you think, can anyone climb this wall? For me, that's where the perfect T's are, the heaven ones. Um, if you're able to figure out how to climb that glass wall straight up vertical, that's when you're going to see, I don't know, what is the meaning behind all of this. And I think, so far I think it's not possible. And maybe the reality is that you accepting that that's not possible is the meaning behind the whole thing. That, but I haven't accepted that yet. I'm going to keep trying to climb this glass. But it's very fun to find T's that have that level of challenge to them. But yeah, I was listening to some music, old music from like my high school days, and it kind of triggered my uh, willingness, my intention to make this video. So I hope that someone finds some value in it. Thank you for listening.